Reach In, a program bringing the good news of Jesus into the world of professional athletics with your host, Bruce Christopher.
And we're delighted to be with you today. I think in my lifetime I've experienced two thrills of happiness. And that's when I was involved playing pool on ABC Wide World of Sports, doing the first innovation with Minnesota Fats several years ago, having Willie Moscone there to coordinate and help color coordinate the program. And then another high, of course, goes back to when I was a little boy of 7 years old, when my pastor came down and he asked me, had I ever accepted Jesus Christ to come into my life? And I just said, no, Pastor Lori Price, I haven't, but I'd sure like to. And that's got to be some great highs in my life. This is another high today on Reach In, a program reaching out to Christian professional athletes from all walks of life. Maybe at one time or another you've been involved in your kind of activity, that you wanted to be a tennis player one time. You may have wanted to be a golf player, a football player. That's, here, a football, automatically a football. We have something coming up for you on the program. Everything you always wanted to know about a Christian football. And our guests today, Larry and Sue Karachuk, are going to be back very, very shortly. We're not going to say much more, but stay tuned for a reach-in to your life. Don't go away. Come right back. Over there.
Begin to come in, and we got two special guests I want to introduce right now, and we're just happy to have with us a legendary figure that just came in on Praise the Lord to honor us by his presence here today, and he's been a part of hearing all the preaching and the testimonies and the whole works here today. And Bruce Christopher and the legendary Minnesota Fats is with us here today, who is one of the greatest billiard pool players and the billiard and pool player in the country here today. And we don't too often have a pool player on Praise the Lord. I want you to know that, Minnesota Fat. But let's give a welcome to these two people. Let's welcome them to come and be with us up here. Will you do that? All right. Boy, it's great to have you on the program.
Glad to be here. And I heard you speak. And all the places you've been, I've been many, many times and saw all the things that you said you saw.
Yes, yes.
And it's a terrible situation.
It is, isn't it?
And Bruce is a real good friend of mine.
Yes.
And I'm not a very religious person. I don't know why or
sure.
that. I'm born a Catholic.
Yes.
But I was so busy in my business when I was a young fella trying to eat and sleep. I didn't have time to go to church. I never went to school either.
Is that right?
That's exactly right. But I've done very well.
You know, that kind of reminds me of Minnesota. That's about the story about the fellow went down to be did you hear that to the Baptist church to try to get to be a janitor? And they said, well, we'll give you the job if you'll sign right here. And he said, I can't because I can't read or write. And so they said, well, you can't have the job. And he went outside, and he's kind of disappointed. And there was a fellow selling fruit, so he bought himself an apple. And he's just getting ready to eat the apple, and a fellow came by and said, I'll give you a quarter for that apple. So he sold him the apple, and he went over and bought himself 2 more apples with that. And a fellow came by and said, I'll give you a quarter. And he sold them and made 50 cents. He thought it was a lucrative business, so he got himself a fruit stand. You've heard this story, so I'll tell it to you. You haven't heard it? It's a good one. You'll like this one.
Yeah.
To make a long story short, he ended up in the fruit business and made $1 million. And one day he went down to the bank and said, I'd like to deposit the $1 million. They said, that'd be wonderful. Sign your name right here. Well, he said, I cannot read or write. And the fellow said, where in the world would you be if you could read or write? And he said, the janitor at the First Baptist Church. Think what would happen to you if you'd gone through school, Minnesota Fat.
Well, I have no idea, but I don't have to read or write because I use a stamp. See?
He stamps his name on everything.
I stamp my name on everything. See?
Do you really?
That's exactly right. This stamp right here, which I'll stamp on your furniture here. See, that's my stamp.
That's
see?
your stamp.
And with that, I could buy the building.
Tommy, this is one of the first opportunities perhaps this man has got to hear the gospel and the good news of Christ. And it's wonderful that he gave us our time to come over here in his busy schedule. After we played our first match here, we tied in our first of our 5-city shootout. But this is the first opportunity that Minnesota fans has had to hear about Jesus Christ, and I'm just delighted.
Isn't that neat?
It's a great opportunity to witness to 40 million pool players alone, Patty, would you say, in the United States?
There's over 100 million people.
100 million
It's one of the largest industries in the world.
100 million.
Yeah, and in 1930, there was 5,500 pool halls in the city of New York. And in 1931, 5,000 couldn't open the doors on account of the Depression. And then the Depression got worse. And well, I've been around a long time, you know.
Yeah.
I've been
You would
around
make
a long
a great
time.
preacher. Minnesota Pats would make a great preacher. Right.
Minnesota Fats, would you mention a little bit? Were you born in poverty? I never heard your story. Tell us
in
about it.
poverty. There's no such poverty as I was born. My people came from Switzerland. My mother and father couldn't speak English. And we lived in tenement houses and different places where uncles and aunts that came before us at the turn of the century.
Yes.
My old man swung a 20-pound sledge for a quarter a day. It cost a quarter to turn the stove on in New York. Now, I live in areas in Illinois where it's pretty bad, but everybody's got bicycles and motorcycles.
Yeah.
The only toy that a child ever had where I was born in New York City in these different neighborhoods would be an old broom if he could find one, and then he'd cut the edge of it off and use it like a cat stick, I used to call it playing cat stick. And I never did play with children. I hung in saloons from the time I was 2 years old in order to eat.
Yeah.
See, I would go in saloon. I had 100 uncles, and none of them was my uncle. But when they went in to drink a nickel beer, I'd eat all the free lunch.
Mm-hmm.
See, I'd tell them that's my uncle. See, and then the boss would put me on a pool table, and I was rolling the balls around when I was 2 years old. And I was an expert before I was like 8. And then I started traveling clean around the earth, and I played every champion that ever lived in every country. I'm also an expert with cards, because in the saloons, I would watch a couple of Chinamen, or a couple of Greeks, or a couple of Italians, or a couple of Jews playing the different games that they play in their country. And I wound up being one of the greatest Russian pinochle players, claviage players, 12-card straight rummy players. See, in every different part of the world, they have different games they play. And so by me having nothing else to do but to eat and sleep, and I hardly ever did sleep because I figured I might miss something. You understand? So I was always busy getting a hold of something.
Yeah.
And then when I got to be like 7, 8 years old, I was a protection man for wealthy people's children. So I never did go to school, but when they brought the kids in the limousines up to the school, and then one of them tush hogs in the neighborhood, every neighborhood had a tush hog.
Yeah.
See, a tush hog is one of them overgrown children that likes to abuse other people. See.
Yeah.
Then I used to save all the rabbis from being abused by tough kids. They'd sit in front of the synagogue in a hot summertime with the chair turned backwards, getting a little fresh air, and the kids would come by and pull their beard and holler, "Fox in a bush." See, and then I'd run a few of them down. Yeah, and to keep them out of the neighborhood. I wouldn't never let them come back.
We'd like to make a personal invitation to you, Tommy, at any of our shootouts to come and share the witness of Christ at wire service, AP, Associated Press. It's an opportunity not only playing pool and exposure for the game, for the sport, but it's an opportunity also to reach these millions of pool enthusiasts for Jesus Christ.
You mean you're inviting me to come and share the gospel?
Come and preach and play some pool with us also. That'd be delightful.
Well, I tell you, it would be an experience because I don't know hardly how to pick up a stick, much less the other, but I can sure.
But there's many to do. Some of my biggest fans are preachers and priests. And in St. Louis, I play in a Catholic church that has 25 pool tables in it on Kings Highway.